Yes, how are you all? I hope all is well. My name is Sachin, and this is the Total Cricket Podcast, episode 19. Today is going to be another Hot Topics podcast, the second one in the series. And today's hot topic is that the bitter pay dispute between the Australian Cricketers Association and Cricket Australia has finally ended after months and months of drama. Finally, it is over and we can get back to the cricket in Australia. Now, straight off the bat, the biggest thing about this is that now all the international tours are going to go ahead. Australia's tour of Bangladesh, the tour of India, and probably most importantly, the Ashes are now all confirmed to be going ahead, which is imperative for the health of international cricket. The last thing international cricket could have afforded was for a major team, iconic series like the Ashes, to be cancelled or postponed due to something like this, when already there is a threat from domestic 2020 leagues. It would have been the last thing that international cricket needed. So, definitely a big boost for world cricket. Now, what does this mean for cricket in Australia? Well, just to have a look at the breakdown of what this all means, and credit to Fox Sports for this information. So, the new Memorandum of Understanding is going to be 5 years long, and for the first time in Australian cricket history, it's the same agreement for all male and female players. And also, the revenue sharing model that has been a feature of the MOUs in the past will continue to be in play, and this will include all players, international and domestic, men and women. And I think the biggest thing out of this is really the gender equality pay model and a huge pay rise for the women in Australian cricket, which is fantastic to see. Now, in terms of the revenue sharing model, this was really the big problem. This was where the drama was, this was the sticking point. And really, the Australian Cricketers Association wanted to continue the revenue sharing model that has been a feature of the MOUs in the past, but Cricket Australia, they only wanted revenue sharing for just a few elite international players versus all contracted players. So what has happened is that the model that has been agreed upon, the players, all players, will receive 27.5% of forecast revenue and up to 2.5% of a performance pool. That's what they're calling it. And that is estimated to be worth about $500 million. Now, interestingly, I think probably the best thing out of this is that all male, female, international, domestic players will share this revenue. So it's really going to help the domestic players, I think, particularly get a good share. And if the revenue goes over the forecast amount, then there will be a flow into grassroots cricket, which again is good because that is really where cricketers are born. You need to put money into grassroots cricket to ensure the future of your cricket is really in good hands. But as I said before, the biggest thing about this is the gender equity pay structure. Now, if you look at it now, female players have a lot more rights under the new MOU. And really, it's amazing that some of these things weren't there before. So, what you'll get now is the WNCL, which is the Women's Domestic 50 over competition, and the WBBL prize money. They'll get match fees, they'll get a retirement fund, marketing and performance pools of money, obviously, injury payments. That is a lot of good things that have added and really much needed. And I think the biggest thing, look at the minimum retainer contracts, the values of them. Now, obviously, the men have got small hikes of somewhere in between. If you have a look at Australian men's players, the base rate will increase 3%. For state men, the base rate will increase 7.2%. But the women have really benefited from this. For Australian women, the base rate will increase 80.2% from $40,000 to $72,000 in the first year of the agreement. That is a huge pay hike and much deserved. That kind of salary is now going to be enough for the women to play full time. They don't need to have a part-time job on the side. They can focus on cricket and be able to play cricket for a living. So I think that is a great thing. For the state women as well, they're getting a huge pay rise, 133% increase on the base rate from $11,000 to $25,000 in the first year of the MOU. That again is excellent. Obviously, $25,000 isn't enough to really make a living off of cricket, but it's still a huge increase. And certainly, what's important to remember is that these women will also have WBBL payments because most of the state cricketers will play in the WBBL. And the base rate for WBBL players has increased 47% from $7,000 to $10,000. So for really, you're talking about 2 months of cricket, they're going to be getting $10,000 at a minimum, which is really good. And I think this is a big thing that the Australian women's cricketers have received such a big pay rise. It was long in the making, and for them to be able to really be able to play cricket for a living is, I think, a huge step forward. And it's important in developing more professionalism in the women's game, because in the women's game you do have quite a big gap between the international players and some of the domestic players. So hopefully we'll see that gap now start to narrow, and the quality of domestic cricket raise, the quality of the WBBL raise. I think it can only be a positive thing, and it's great that out of all this, that this positive thing has come out of it. It's certainly been really lost among all the ruckus, but nonetheless, it's very nice to see that. And really, that's the main thing to gain from this. But the good thing is that, as I said, finally it is over and the revenue sharing model has been agreed to. So really, that is the impact it's going to have on Australian cricket. For the women, it's going to help them immensely. The men, it's going to get them back on the park. And both those two things are great. Obviously, relations between the two parties, the Australian Cricketers Association and Cricket Australia, are going to be a bit strained after this. And really, it was something that really was avoidable, I think. I think both sides were a little bit greedy, but at the same time, from my opinion, I would rather the players get more money than the board, because at the end of the day, they're the product. They're the ones who are generating the revenue for Cricket Australia. Without the players, they have no product. So for me, I always would side with the players, and the fact that all players that are contracted by Cricket Australia will be able to have a chunk of that revenue sharing model pie, I think is a good thing, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are driving the money. They're bringing the money in. So I think it's only fair that they get their fair share. Now, what does this all mean for cricket in general? Now, I look at it and I think if you look at pay disputes, most countries have had pay disputes of some kind, but not on the scale of this where international cricket was threatened. We've seen the West Indies have pay disputes, and I remember 7, 8 years ago, they basically sent they played Bangladesh in a test series with basically a B team, but there was still a West Indies team. Now, if this had not been reached, an agreement had not been reached, Australia wouldn't have had a team to put out. But the tour to Bangladesh, if this had gone on for a few more weeks, the tour to Bangladesh would not have gone ahead, and there wouldn't have been an Australian team. So I think the magnitude of this pay dispute is unrivaled compared to any other we've seen before. And a big factor around this, I've talked about it before, is player power is at an all-time high in the modern game. Now, with the domestic 2020 league circuit being right throughout the year, there's so many options. There is a clear alternative to international cricket. So now, international cricketers they have a decision to make, and they can really dig their feet in and ask their home boards for a lot more money than previously, where they probably would have been at the mercy of the board. Now they're able to dictate terms. And this is all because of the fact that they need to be offered a really competitive wage if they're going to play international cricket. This is the reality of modern cricket. Now, look at someone like AB de Villiers. I think he is almost like probably the glaring example of this. A guy who looks like he's going to give up Test cricket to play more in the domestic 2020 circuit. And really, this is because if you look at South Africa, the rand is a very poor currency, and Cricket South Africa cannot provide a competitive wage for AB de Villiers to keep him there compared to these domestic 2020 leagues. And really, this is now going to create a sort of dichotomy. It's either international cricket or domestic 2020 leagues. Pick one, because we're going to see now this is going to happen more often. And the future of international cricket is certainly on tenterhooks. Obviously, there is no doubting the influence of these 2020 leagues, the money that they have to offer. And it's up to the ICC to improve international cricket so that players see it as something worth playing over these 2020 leagues. And that is a topic for another podcast about how I feel that international cricket can be improved. But it is imperative that steps are taken to improve international cricket in many ways so that we can protect the interest of the game. The best players can stay in the international game, and we don't see a big drop off of quality. And we see the best players playing in these domestic 2020 leagues instead of international cricket. So that is the big one for me, is that this pay dispute potentially paves the way for future pay disputes. Now, the first one's always the toughest, but now players are going to look at this and think, hey, we can get what we want. We don't have to settle. And I think it's a dangerous precedent. But again, I don't begrudge the players of trying to get more money. Because when you look at the competition, they are offering extremely lucrative wages. So, of course, it's reasonable to expect them to want money. But I think the issue is going to be international cricket and its future, because at the moment, the product is not particularly great. International cricket is not particularly riveting, I feel, for a number of reasons. You look at the bilateral series, the way they're scheduled, you look at scheduling in general, how tight the schedules are, how little rest players get, the disproportionate amount of games different countries play. There are many, many things wrong with international cricket that make it less and less appealing to the best players. And if it continues on this path, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see the big players, more of them, just go to these domestic 20 leagues and become 2020 mercenaries. People have talked about it for many years being a possibility. I think if things don't change, we could be very close to seeing it become a reality. So those are my thoughts on the issues. I think for cricket in Australia, at the end of the day, the result of this pay dispute is overall positive. Obviously, relationships have certainly been strained, bridges have been burned, but for the players, I think the result is overwhelmingly positive. For cricket in general, it sets a precedent, and with the way international cricket is going, I think we're going to see more of these types of pay disputes given the competitive alternative, how lucrative it is. So that's it for me today, this Hot Topics podcast. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. You can check it out on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. All the links to those platforms can be found on the Twitter page. The next podcast, I will be reviewing the second test match between Sri Lanka and India. That should be on Monday. And then on Tuesday or Wednesday, I'll be reviewing the England versus South Africa fourth test match, depending on when the game finishes. But that is it for me today. And as always, thanks for listening, and I'll see you later.